Falling Stars by Plate Crowd 5610. Fourth part of Hunting Nemesis. Chapter 2. Stay with me, please. Summary. Sometimes things need to get worse before they get better. The world was spinning. Danny groaned, his eyes flickering open to look up at the blue sky above him. He winced back as he blinked rapidly at the blinding midday sun. Danny was sprawled across a fallen tree. He was in his human form. Why was he in his human form? Had the tree been knocked over in the crash? Right, the crash! Starscream! He sat up with a jolt, fast enough to make him almost pass out from pain. He grabbed his hat and then rapidly glanced at the area around him. Danny and Starscream were lying in a crater, filled with fallen trees and debris. Behind them was a long trail from where they had crashed through the forest, taking half of it with them. At least the shield Danny put up took the brunt of the damage. Starscream was about 10 feet away from him, half buried in dirt and scattered trees, his frame mangled and leaking emergon. Too much emergon. Starscream! Danny scrambled to his feet, not having the energy to transform and fly, and ran towards the Seeker, tripping once before rightening himself. He made it to the Khan's shoulder, putting his hand on the plating, as he started frantically looking over all his injuries, core dripping at the sight of all the spilled emergon. This was bad. So very bad. Starscream, come on, stay with me, wake up! He finally called out. He shoved at the Seeker's shoulder, trying to make sure he was awake. He needed to be awake. Starscream's optics flickered weakly, a pained groan escaping him as his system struggled to keep functioning. Starscream tried to focus his optics on Danny, but failed. Helm crashing back down with a thud. Danny bit his lip hard enough that he could taste blood. He needed to get Starscream medical attention now. The wing joint was luckily pressed into the ground, temporarily stopping the flow of emergon. Then he spotted a dismembered limb not too far from them outside the crater. Luckily, it looked like it was still in one piece. Maybe he could reattach it somehow. But that was a later problem. Right now, the most pressing injury is Starscream's knee. Danny could work with that. He's done plenty of joint repairs with Knockout. He's helped repair Starscream's knee so many times with the other injuries. He could do this. Danny ran down alongside the length of Starscream's body, hand never leaving the plating until he reached the joint. The knee was crushed with the weight of Megatron's PD as he used it as leverage to rip off his wing. Looking closer, Danny felt a wave of dread, suddenly unsure he could salvage it. He had never seen a joint crushed this badly. Maybe Knockout could. But Knockout wasn't here. Danny could deal with getting Starscream the ability to walk again later. Right now he needed to stop the flow of emergon to keep Starscream online long enough to make it to that point. No good having a leg to walk on if you aren't alive to use it. Danny leaned over the joint, trying to figure out which of the emergon lines were leaking the most. Which ones would he need to seal off first? Danny grabbed onto the thin plate of armor, which could have almost resembled a human kneecap if it hadn't been so mangled. That had to go. Danny grabbed it and pulled hard. He felt Starscream stir with pain, but there was not much more of a reaction. The knee guard came off easily, given how messed up it was, and then he dropped on the ground next to him with a dull thud in the dirt. Now he had more room to work. Danny tried to squeeze as much ecto energy into his fingertips as he could. He needed to seal those lines. All this, everything protecting Starscream, fighting Megatron, using the shield. For normally he would be okay doing all those things, but right now he felt something was draining him, eating him alive. Right now he was surprised he had any energy left. But he needed to use it. He needed to use what he could. He needed to help Starscream. The energy surged through his fingers and onto the torn emergon lines. He was able to use his power like a wielder, cauterizing and sealing the line shut with a flickering green glow that reflected off of Starscream's plating. Danny had done this before. He had seen Knockout do this before. So why was his heart racing to the point where he felt like he might pass out? All he could hear was the plumbing of his heart in his ears. He needed to calm down. He needed to do this. He needed to help Starscream. Who knows when Megatron would gather his bearings enough to come down here and try finish what he started. Then he didn't have the energy to even use his intangibility again, much less fly Starscream away from here. Then he needed to focus on something else, someone else. Then he took a deep breath, holding another line in his grip. He strained his ears, listening, and then he caught it. Starscream's spark pulse. It's weak, but it's there. Danny knew Starscream was alive, as long as that was pulsing. Danny nodded to himself, grabbing another line. Ba-dum, ba-dum. Danny grabbed another line, sealing it before reaching for another. Ba-dum, ba-dum. The sizzle of the immigrant cauterizing filled the air, but even as Danny worked, more Immigrant oozed from other injuries, seeping into the dirt beneath him, the ground absorbing it greedily. Ba-dum, ba-dum. Immigrant was coating Danny's hands. Ba-dum, ba-dum, dum, ba-ah. His spark was stuttering. Danny wasn't working fast enough. No, stay with me! Starscream, stay with me! Danny begged, his voice strained. Danny shoved himself away from the knee and ran up towards Starscream's spark. The knee was as good as it was going to get. Danny needed to find out why Starscream's spark was stalling. He made it to the Khan's arm and frantically scrambled up onto his chest plate. Starscream showed no reaction to the human climbing on him, not even a twitch. This was so bad. Maybe the fall had crushed some of his internal system. He may be losing Emergon internally instead. Losing Emergon that was supposed to be feeding into his spark, keeping him alive. I need you to open your spark chamber, Danny said, desperately hoping the Khan would respond. Twitch, do anything. Starscream, he cried out. Starscream never let anyone near his spark. The closest thing had been tossing Danny into his subspace a time or two, but his spark chamber was still closed off. He wouldn't even let Knockout, the Decepticon's chief medic, anywhere near it. He was very defensive over it. As much as Danny hated doing this, hated doing something that he knew Starscream was so against, he didn't have a choice. He didn't have time. Danny faced his hand through Starscream's chest plate, grabbing at the sensor he knew was there. From all of the medical schematics he had been studying about Seekers, he needed to open up his chest forcefully to get to his spark. If there was any damage to the Immergon lines leading to it, he was done for. The plating came apart in a few short transformations. The sound of crushing metal, struggling to move, grained on Danny's ears as he winced. It opened most of the way before stalling, but it was enough for Danny to fit. He carefully lowered himself into the open hole in Starscream's chest, horrified to find Emergon spilling on the inside as well, enough to coat the bottom of the chest cavity, almost 2 inches deep. Then he kneeled down in the substance and started searching for leaks. The Emergon lines leading to a Cybertronian spark were way bigger and carried much more Emergon, so those were the priority. Danny searched while some of the lines had damage. Nothing should be spilling the sheer amount of Emergon that Danny was kneeling in right now. 3 inches now. Danny could see the spark in Starscream's chest pulse. Some of the pulse would sputter off, the others would be full and strong, but they were getting further and further apart. And Danny saw it, one of the lines leading to Starscream's spark wasn't attached. It wasn't attached at all. Danny reached for the line. His fingers couldn't even wrap around the whole thing. He lifted it up as a concerned amount of emergon was flowing sluggishly from it. His heart lunged, and he heaved the line up, desperately pulling it back to where it was torn from. Clearly meant to be connected to a spark. Around Starscream's spark was a metal sphere designed to keep the spark crystal safe. Danny just needed to reattach it. Danny plugged the line back in, but he needed to keep it there. He needed something harder, more powerful than his powers right now. He reached for his belt. Luckily, he still had his ecto weapons on him, like he always did. He just needed to fine-tune the ecto blaster, and it could become a very decent wielder. It only took a few seconds to calibrate it. Danny raised up the blaster, and the tip of the weapon rested against the connection between the spark casing and the line. Danny held his breath. He couldn't mess this up. He pulled the trigger and held it to the seam, steadily melting the two metal components back together again. He almost had to close his eyes from the brightness of it, but he held strong with a steady hand. Danny jumped slightly as Starscream let out a piercing shriek that devolved into static. The first reaction yet. Danny cursed but continued wielding. Starscream would die without this line. The Seeker could be mad at him later. After a few more painstaking moments, Danny reattached the line. He quickly pulled his hands away, holding them up in surrender. Okay, Starscream. That's it. I just need to reattach the line. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to hurt. Starscream's spark started pulsing slower. Danny's eyes widened. What now? He reattached the line. It should be getting better, not worse. Danny's breath hitched, his hands trembling as he tried to focus. Starscream's vocalizer made a horrible, static popping sound before cutting out in a groan of pain, his head rolling to the side as his optics stemmed further. The sound sent a jolt of terror through Danny's core. He started reaching for smaller lines with minimal damage. Maybe if he could seal those. Stay with me, Starscream! Danny called out, voice rising in desperation. He tried to go faster but couldn't. Promise me you will stay with me. It's all my fault. I can't. How could he fix this? How? His mind raced with everything he'd ever seen in the med bay. How to patch emergon leaks, how to stabilize failing systems, but nothing was working fast enough. Starscream's frame shuddered, a faint broken whine escaping him as his optics flickered once more, and then dimmed entirely. Shit, no, Starscream, come on! Danny's voice broke, his hands gripping the Seeker's lines tighter, as though he could will him back to consciousness. Please, don't do this! Don't die! Danny's throat tightened, the familiar surge of panic rising like a trivial wave. He pressed harder, his powers sparkling erratically as he tried to keep Starscream's system from failing. Every second felt like another step closer to losing him. Stay with me, stay with me. Danny's voice were barely a whisper now, ignoring the strain it was putting on his own energy reserves. He couldn't lose him. Not like this. Starscream's limp frame remained unresponsive, and Danny's core pulled harder in his chest, a sickening dread settling over him. His protection obsession working overdrive. He can't let another person he cares about die. He can't. He didn't know how much longer he could keep this up. He could feel the burn in his hands with the constant use of his ghost powers in his human form, but he didn't care. He would keep going, even if it meant a sudden hum filled the air. Danny's panicked breath caught in his throat. As he looked up, eyes wide, he froze, hands still glowing, hovering over Starscream's wound, as the unmistakable sound of a ground bridge opening echoed through the forest. A swirling vortex of green energy appeared beside them. Then he felt a deep dread wash over him as the ground bridge pulsed. He had no idea who or what would come through. He reached for his belt and grabbed his ectoblaster. He may not have enough energy to shoot from his hands, but this would have to do. He wasn't about to let anyone heard Starscream never again. For Max emerged from the swirling puddle, massive and armed with cannons in place of service. Danny's eyes narrowed. He didn't recognize them, but it was clear they weren't here for a friendly chat.